Hola, friendos. You don't have to adjust your screen if you're watching on YouTube. Eventually, when I make these introductions, you are not going to have to adjust your speakers. Things are a little different this week, and we're going to explain why. But before we explain why, you could have been anywhere in the world, but right now you're here with us. The last week of September, Cyber AB Townhall took place last night. And so that you guys didn't have to bear hearing me talk for a full hour, we've brought in some friends to talk, and we're going to go over that town hall. And I just want to introduce them first and let them introduce themselves. Obviously, first and foremost, we have the great Joy Belinda Beeland, JBB, as I like to reference her, the ray of sunshine that she is. And also joining us today, we have Kyle Gingrich from the CAICO. Joy, if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself to everybody.
Sure. What an honor to be here. I'm very excited about this. So my name is Joy Beeland. I'm with Summit 7. I currently serve as the Vice President of Partner Strategy, and I am a CCA. I'm also one of the provisional instructors, one of the original provisional assessors in the program. And originally in my role at Edwards Performance Solutions before I came to Summit 7, I helped to develop the first CCP class, the 5-day boot camp. And so it's really fun to be here. Not only are you my colleague, Jason and Jacob, and I get to learn so much from everything you guys are doing, but just to be able to share in this audience and kind of look at a different perspective of everything happening in CMMC with the ecosystem with my friend Kyle is going to be really exciting as the first guest I get to bring to the show. So, Kyle?
That's great.
So thanks again for having me today too. I'm excited to be here to kind of share more information about the program. And as Joy said, we've been working in this together now for 3 years. I'm Kyle Gingrich, and I'm the Interim Executive Director of the CAICO, which is the Cybersecurity Assessor and Instructor Certification Organization, i.e. a mouthful. And we are a subsidiary of the Cyber AB. And so I'm here today. I've got a deep breadth of background within the training and certification world, which is kind of the realm in which I play for the CAICO for CMMC. But I'm looking forward to having this conversation today and sharing whatever information I can. So thanks for having me.
That's super excited. I'm so glad that you could join us. And Joy, I'm so glad that you can join us. And a little bit of announcement, drum roll, please. Jacob's not here, so there's no producer in the back door for me to say club horns, but moving forward, a little different cadence in the show. As you know, this is Summit Up, CMMC News and Notes and Roundup. And we've spent a lot of time talking about rulemaking because rulemaking has kind of funneled what everything's going to be, all this stuff that we're going to talk about now. But as Kyle's going to attest to, and as Joy can attest to, and anybody that's watched maybe the past 2 Cyber AB town halls, things are a bit spicier now, right? There's more information to be dished out. Things are moving at a faster pace. Things are moving up. We're going to talk about that later. So once a month, I am going to be able to be blessed with the presence of the great JBB, right? And we are going to dish in everything that's going on in CMMC. And hopefully we can wink, wink, leverage some of those connections that JBB's developed. I don't know. I wanted to catch on. JBB, I want it to be a thing. But some of the connections that Joyce developed, being the ray of sunshine that she is and developed a reputation in the industry that she has, and being the triple OG of training, as we like to reference her. And as I like to tell people, if this was a coaching tree, Joy Beeland would be my Bill Belichick, right? She trained me. She made me a CCP, motivated me to be a PI, helped me get my PI certification, talked me through the ropes. So my super soldier status is mostly attributed to her. And then obviously the program that the CAICO has developed. So for moving forward, what you're going to have is you're going to have me and Joy once a month, and then the regular Laurel and Hardy show between me and Jacob, the back and forth, the dancer. No, Jacob didn't shave his beard, get beautiful skin and glowing long locks. It's just we're going to have a different perspective for once a week, and we're going to dive into rulemaking and all those other news and notes still. But we think that we need to dedicate one full show to what's happening in the ecosystem, because there's going to be a lot happening in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And with that being said, there was a Cyber AB town hall last night. And before we jump into that and go over those notes, right, I kind of want to segue into that by doing the housekeeping, paying the bills, talking about the things that we think are important for other people to know, besides the stuff that we're going to blabber about during this podcast. And besides, all the official things that are going to come out. But every week on the week, the great and powerful Daniel Akridge and my normal co-host Jacob Horn get together for an Ask Me Anything CMMC. And this week, airing the day after this show comes on, special guest appearance from the CEO of Summit 7, Scott Edwards. Growing popularity in that AMA, it's basically a safe space, right? This is your CMMC safe space. Go ask two people that have demonstrated knowledge. Two of the hardest working people in the industry, in my opinion, offer up their time for an hour once a week for you to go and just be safe and ask questions so you understand this better. Because I think everybody on this call can agree, the more you know, the better situation that you're going to be in. And then the next thing,
wildly popular event. I mean, it's really awesome to see how many people are showing up and asking great questions on that. So it's very exciting.
You always fear in situations like that, Joy, that people would be like, I don't want to be the person that's out like that exposing yourself, because it's a public forum, right? It's on LinkedIn, it's on YouTube. I'm putting a comment out there that says that I don't know this. Sometimes there is a bit of fear in people, right? Especially, I talked about this on a recent podcast that I went on. There's a fear of putting information out there and letting people know where you're vulnerable, because people may exploit those vulnerabilities. But realistically, the more that you accept how vulnerable you are in this situation, I think the better off you're going to be, because going into it and just winging it is not good. It's going to be very costly, and it can prove problems. Now, awareness is one of those things that we talked about, and that awareness and asking those questions in that safe space with Jacob and Daniel weekly. Scott this week is one of the things. The other thing I want to plug is our CMMC Pathfinder tool. Now, on this show, we kind of tend to steer away from the Summit 7. But when we come across something good, I want to talk about it. Our CMMC Pathfinder tool is one of those tools that helps discover the awareness for organizations trying to figure out what to do with CMMC. Where do I need to start? What do I need? What do I need to do? It has been wildly popular. I think that people are clicking it so much that it's going to break, but luckily it hasn't broke. It's been well engineered, and people are discovering stuff. And it's crazy to see how much clearer the journey may be for some of the organizations after going through the Pathfinder tool and having this conversation with people at Summit 7 that can kind of steer you in the right direction. I think it's also interesting to see the popularity that's picked up since things have happened in the ecosystem.
Well, it's free and it's super informative.
Right.
I mean,
I think that if there's something that I don't have to pay somebody to come in to tell me something that a tool is going to tell me online quickly and freely, that's fine. And now there's things that come along with it. Now, last bit of housekeeping before we start talking the business. And this, I think, is the most important piece. That's why I saved it for the last. This week, something special happened to our YouTube channel, a YouTube channel that a lot of people put blood, sweat, and tears into, a YouTube channel that a lot of people dedicate time to behind the scenes, on the scenes, making videos, coming up with creative ideas. The Summit 7 YouTube channel that some people in the industry refer to as Summit 7 University. I hope that catches on like JBB. Surpassed 10,000 subscribers. And from me, and speaking on behalf of the entire organization that is responsible for that channel, I cannot tell you how grateful, how respectful, how humble, how appreciative we are that you take what has accumulated to 6 years so far this year, 6 years of free educational content around cloud security compliance, CMMC regulatory requirements being absorbed, being distributed by people that also, I think we need to make this a note. This isn't our primary job responsibility. We do this because we came to a company that allowed us that opportunity to do that. We want you to do this. This is something that we really like to do. So with that, stop running my mouth. Let you guys contribute. Let me catch up, and then we'll jump in.
I do think that, first of all, the live Q&A on Fridays, we get almost as many questions as the Cyber AB Town Hall. No, I'm joking, because I do notice that the Cyber AB, how many questions do you guys sort through, Kyle, every month? I mean, it's got to be hundreds, right? And just trying to pick the most important ones. Well, Jason, I know you're submitting like 200 yourself, but anyways, it is really great to see the engagement. And that's one of the things I've appreciated about the Town Hall is the amount of time you try to save each month to respond to the community and get some of those burning questions answered, and having the vote process for what are the most important questions. So I know that the things that you're sharing on the Town Hall are a result of, let's dive deeper into this question that continues to surface each month, right? Not just what's new, but let's revisit. And there was some revisiting in the Town Hall, but I'll let you go ahead and take it away for what you think the recap flow should be here. Jason?
Yeah. So just to kind of, you saw me raise my hand when you started talking about the amount of questions. So I think, Kyle, I think this is publicly known now. I think we've said this on the show quite a while. Jacob and I like to lurk in the questions. And that's because, for us to do a show that produces information that maybe people are desiring what the topic is, it's great to go to places where they feel, again, I like to use this term, safe space for them to ask the questions, right? Nobody's ever judged you for not being able to get to the questions, because just like last night, you would need a 4.5-hour town hall to get to the 471 questions. I know that because I counted them all, because obviously I went through them all. So the 471 questions submitted, you would need 4.5 hours, right? So I don't think nobody's judging that. But for us, for what we do, it's a great source for us to go and say, hey, this is what they're desiring. This is what they want to know. And then for us to let Jacob loose in a dark room for a couple of days and then come with a big show outline that we have to react to. But realistically, it's a great way for you to kind of steer the information that we're dishing out, to steer the information from the AB's perspective. Maybe when you're formulating future town halls, I'm pretty sure, and you can say yes or no, I don't know how much you can release, but I'm pretty sure you look at those questions and you're like, hey, people are really hammering in on something to do with, I don't know, international CCA requirements. And then all of a sudden, bam, people are really asking us about FedRAMp moderate equivalency. And then all of a sudden, bam, there's a section on that. And I think that that's part of it. Maybe we are in a society where we want that instant gratification all the time. And so when I ask a question, especially when it's something that I'm very curious about, or something that has high circumstances behind it, right? If there's negative consequences attached to me not knowing that answer, I want that answer with super urgency. I want that instant gratification when I ask it. So we might get into those situations, right, where you have these two loudmouth guys on a podcast, or we have to wait until the next monthly Cyber AV Town Hall where they make it a topic. And that's where we extract all that information and we go there. So with that being said, let's talk about this month's town hall, because there is a lot of things where we talked about this in the green room before the show. I talked about it in a LinkedIn post. I've seen multiple LinkedIn posts about it, but these are the things that when I was going through the town hall and Matt Travis, the CEO, was distributing the information, or yourself, you kind of turned your head. You're like, wait a minute. So let's talk. Every month, we lead with the CEO welcome, right? And this month's CEO welcome and update led off with a bang. And the reason why is because we discussed, or Matt, I say we, like us and them, the team, right? So the discussion was, right? Got Kyle here. I'm part of the team now, guys. But so the discussion was around the 32 and 48 CFR rule and the expectations and the timeline for the expectations, right? And some wrinkles that have thrown the projections that the AB recently was publicly coming out and putting, have thrown them to the left and sped it up. Kind of, and this is no surprise, anybody that's watched our show and watched last week's show particularly, kind of covers some of the same topics, the congressional review, the look back, and things of that nature. But essentially what was established and what Matt had said was, is that Congress, once the rule goes final, the congressional review, Congress gets 60 days to review it. We are right now currently in the 118th iteration of the Congress. The time period for that congressional review, the 60 days, expires past the time that this Congress will be in office, right? They're going to adjourn and then a new one's going to convene. Mm-hmm. If that were to happen, the 119th Congress, the one coming in, would have a time to review it based on that look back. They can go back and look at it if they choose to. Mm-hmm. However, we don't need, and we've learned that, we don't need congressional review to end for the CMMC program to go live. Mm-hmm. When the CMMC rule goes final and it is published, on that CMMC rule, there's going to be something called an effective end date, right? An EID. Yeah. That effective end date means that whatever that date is, November 30th, December 31st, I don't know. Sounds familiar, December 31st, 2017. Why not December 31st, 2024? I'm not putting that out there, but instead of rocking around the Christmas tree, what is it, all day and sighing, to reading 442 page rules?
If you had a crystal ball, I don't know. What would you think?
I just, listen, tea leaves, right? We read the tea leaves. But we saw that, for the longest time, the public thought, or, certain public thought, was that congressional review period has to end for anything to happen. And that is not the case. Actually, the last CMMC rule, as Jacob demonstrated in the last episode, didn't do that. So there's ways that the rule could be negated, but there's stringent circumstances for that, right? Goes through that congressional review period, the 119th or 118th Congress says, wait a minute, we don't like this. Well, in order for that rule to be pulled off the board, something crazy has to happen. Both parties in Congress have to vote, and the president has to authorize a signature saying, let's take this off the table and do it.
Mhm.
The message that was given by Matt last night was this highly unlikely that would happen, right? A better chance, I don't know, of seeing the rule being completely revitalized, or there's very little chance of seeing this rule coming off the table because of all the measures that it has to go through. It's gotten to this point, we're there. Would you agree with that?
Personally, I would agree with that. I mean, if you think about it, this particular program started under a Republican administration, transitioned to a Democratic administration. So the point of the matter is this is a bipartisan effort, right? I mean, protecting our nation is a mission for both parties. So regardless of what happens because of an election or a changeover in Congress, I don't see this impacting it because, again, I think both parties are very focused on protecting our nation in the cyber domain.
Yeah, I would have to think that there would have to be something absolutely insane to happen for somebody to come in. Right now, we're at essentially the 12th hour, right? We're at the 12th hour. Somebody to come in and say, hold the phones. It's been through all these processes. Me, this one singular person, or me, this one person representing this small group of people, have found the key that has to lock this door. We can't open it just yet. I don't see it happening, and that's exactly what the AB, the town hall, the message that came from was. And so what that is, why that is good, right, is because it's a unified message, right? Like we're saying it, the public's saying it now, you're saying it, like this is not going from anywhere. We see it in strategies, all these nesting strategies that Stacey Bostjanik talks about. We see it. We talk about it on shows weekly. It is not going anywhere. More harpening to the point that it is not going anywhere. And another little wrinkle is that not only is it not going anywhere, but the thing that could possibly happen, those stringent circumstances, Congress comes and wipes it off. The program will be live before that's even over with. So that's basically saying we know this is going live. There's really nothing you have to say about it. We're just going through the motions. So with all that being said, in the congressional review period, that discovery being made and Matt reviewing that information, we saw a slide that came up that now moved, and publicly before, and I love to see this. You love to see things moving faster, right? But publicly before, I had never heard anything mentioned or anything put on a screen or distributed that said before March of 2025 from the AB as an AB's official standpoint. Until last night. Last night, again, we're talking eggnog and assessments, right? Like by December 2024, it is quite possible, with all the stars aligning and with how fast everything's moving, that the CMMC program goes live.
Yeah. And let me put out the disclaimer we always have to put out, which is nothing that I'm saying here today is representative of the DoD or should be represented as such. Because again, I'm with the Cyber AB CAICO. But what I would say is that, it really all comes down to the dependency, from OIRA. So first of all, it came back earlier than expected. So that kind of gave a boost to the timeline. But then the other factor is, and again, this is where things, sit and wait, is that you also have to realize that, once they finalize it and hand it over to NARA, for, the Federal Register, for publication to the Federal Register, the issue becomes, where does this particular rule fall in line with everything else? Because as you were, talking about earlier, we've got Congress about to change over, we've got an election in play. And so there are a lot of agencies probably trying to push through their rules at this exact time as well. So what we don't know, and nor would anybody know, is that what is on their plate currently, that would take to get this published. So,
and did I hear correctly, Matt, say last night something to the notion of they can only release a certain amount a day, right? They just can't go and say, all right, all of you are released, right? It has to. Yeah. What's that threshold? Do you know it off the top of your head?
I do not, but I'm not surprised by that, because if you think about when they published the proposed rule, right, there were multiple source documents, right? So there were a ton of source documents. A lot of those documents had to be reformatted. So there were kind of two different formats. There was one that was like easier to read with pages versus others that didn't. And so the bottom line is there's formatting. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes once they're handed that information to then get it published. And, I don't know what staffing looks like to do that. So I'm assuming there's probably a capacity component to this.
In a show a couple months ago, or actually about 4 or 5 weeks ago, Jacob and I covered what NARA considered the CUI program to be their Vietnam, right? And how they would talk about how understaffed they were and how it was, a group that was already full capacity that now had to operate this program that needed its own team and its own. So I can imagine there's a little bit of a backup there that could cause it. I still, I think it's the naive in me. I think it's just the let's get this done already thing. I wouldn't mind under the tree, a final rule. I just wouldn't mind it, with a date on it. So now that there's no more speculation and, we can turn the curtain. And the reason why I say we can turn the curtain is because there's 2 points that I want to get as we wrap this up and move on to the next topic. But the 32 CFR rule is the programmatic rule, right? That is the one that shifts into effect what we like to call the market push for CMMC. The market push for CMMC is these primes that are going to have to answer to the DoD, getting their ducks in a row so that they can win contracts and awards when CMMC requirements, as far as way of 48 CFR, DFAR 7021, start showing up in the contracts as they're being the prime contractor, and they distribute it down. They don't want any weak links. They want to make sure all the ducks are in a row before they bid. So one question that I extracted from last night's town hall, and we'll exclude the names of the person that asked it, but it was talking about Matt Travis's slide about 32 CFR and how the CMMC program goes live. And it was kind of debunking the fact that the program can't start and the assessments can't start then and there. And it was saying reason they can't start is because contract officers can't put CMMC requirements into a contract until a 48 CFR shows up, which is the most absolute terrible stance for you to take. It's the most terrible thing for you to think, because even right now, even more so right now, and I can tell you from somebody with experience over the past 2 weeks talking to these companies, right? These requirements are being flowed down. They're having the conversations. They're saying, what is your plan? Tell us your plan. And now they're reaching out for the lifeboats that people have been talking about for the longest time and trying to come up with a plan. So I think that it's a terrible notion to think this for two reasons. One, because obviously your prime contractor, if you're a sub or a tertiary contractor, it's going to give you the requirements way before the DoD is going to issue it to the prime contractor. I think the second reason that this is a terrible thing is if you're waiting on 48 CFR and you think it's going to take the same pathway of 32 CFR, 32 CFR went lightning fast. 32 CFR, by all accounts, everybody that we've spoken to or everybody that has anything to say about it say that it is an absolutely gigantic rule with a lot of detail. Do you know what 48 CFR isn't? An absolutely large rule with gigantic detail. It's 40-something pages, right? The proposed rule is like 40-something pages. Mm-hmm. So if you thought 32 CFR moved fast, 48 CFR is about to tell everybody to hold its beer, right? It's going to say, hold this. Let me show you that. And this is just, again, from my personal perspective, I speak on behalf of me, not the DoD. Summit 7 gives me a little mic here and turns me loose on their channel. But if you think about it, it's just common sense at this point. I'm not saying this from any inside perspective, but if it took them less days to review a 400-page rule, well, this rule is 10% of that. Common sense tells me, my mama didn't raise no fool. This is going to be quicker too, right? Would you guys believe that?
I think that's fair.
People linking them together and saying, well, we're going to wait until we start seeing it go into contracts. Really, they're going to be in a world of hurt. The market, the return on investment in being an early adopter, getting in line with the C3 PAOs and getting that assessment done as soon as they're able to start issuing a full record assessment certification, those are going to be the winners. And really, it's going to be such a huge difference in the people waiting for 48 CFR to hit, seeing, okay, now the prime is saying we have a contract coming up that we're going to have CMMC level 2 certification required in it. We better start to get ready. There's no way. They're going to have a huge loss of revenue, most likely, and not being able to get ready in time to be awarded that contract.
Right. So. Well, think about it from the perspective, too, that there was a reason joint surveillance was put in place, right? Because you
Yeah.
wanted a lot. There were a lot of companies asking for kind of that early adopter type of program, right, to start getting down that pipeline. And I mean, the line has been forming under joint surveillance since it was first announced. So the bottom line is, those that are early adopters are definitely, to your point, Joy. I mean, they're going to be in a much better position, because the bottom line is if you've been sitting back there waiting for it to be written into your contract or be, pushed onto you as a requirement as a sub, you're already behind. You're already behind, because at minimum, I've heard multitude of kind of timelines, but it seems to be there's one more consistent, is like it's about a 6-month process just to get ready, and I think that's a pretty kind of bare bones estimate. And obviously a lot of factors, but the bottom line is, if we already look 6 months from now, we're already into 2025. And if 48 does come out before then, and again, it's going to have an effective date too, you may have already missed the mark and you're already way behind. And truthfully, you're already kind of way behind now, just because of what it's going to take to get there.
Exactly.
I realistically believe if you choose to wait until 48 CFR goes final and it is produced, the timeline that you have to have not only exceeds the timeline that it's that you'll have until you get it in the contract, it exceeds the timeline for the entire rollout of the program, right? The time that it would realistically take you to get prepared, worst case scenario, 2 years, right? 2 years is what we've seen for the largest lifts of clients in my personal experience. And so if you started when 48 CFR came out, all the contracts are going to have it in anyway. You're going to be done. You're going to be the last one there. Not a good place to be in. Another terrible place to be in, segueing into the next topic, is to be an OSA, OSC. Found out last night also those are two different things. Holy cow. Mind blown. But we could talk about that a little bit. But a place that you don't want to be in as somebody with DFAR 7012 compliance requirements or CMMC requirements for the most part is a company that's storing CUI in a cloud that's not FedRAMp authorized or FedRAMp moderate equivalent, right? Mm-hmm. And so last night, the big penalties come along with that. But last night, there was a slide that just kind of put out the information there about FedRAMp moderate equivalency and kind of the roles of not only the cloud service provider that is getting that equivalence, but also the OSC, OSA, and the situation to demonstrate the compliance that moderate equivalency letter or whatever came. So a couple things I just want to quickly point out there, get some feedback from you guys, after that, and then we can roll on. But for the cloud service provider, it is important if you are FedRAMp moderate equivalent, that you have achieved 100% compliance with the FedRAMp moderate baseline, security baseline, and that was conducted by a FedRAMp 3 PAO, right? That's an important part of it. And there has to be supporting documentation that's given to you, whether it's an authorization letter that we've come to know and love from different vendors or whatever, that says that, hey, Jason's cloud service provider company passed our FedRAMp moderate equivalency baseline, and they have the letter. That's not where it ends. That letter is not enough for you as the OSA, OSC when it comes time for assessments. And Joy, I really want you to weigh in on this. But when it comes down to it, I just can't say, I use Jason's cloud. He went to Joy's 3PAO and Joy's 3PAO gave him a letter that says they're FedRAMp, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not how it works. The OSC has a responsibility to not only validate the body of evidence from the CSP. The body of evidence is what the CSP has presented to the assessor that demonstrates that they meet the requirements. In addition to that, they have to possess the client responsibility matrix that is basically a document that says that the cloud service provider does these things for the client. The client is still responsible to do these things, or they do these things on their own. Who shares the responsibility in this relationship to make sure all these efforts are carried out? Because there's just some things that are outside the scope and reach of the cloud service provider in the relationship. And the other thing is that, and this was a very interesting wrinkle, but I know why it exists, ensure that the CSP has an incident response plan. Now, my experience with FedRAMp, you can't get FedRAMP authorized if you don't have one, but hey, potato, we'll throw an extra bullet point in there. The next thing, approve the use of the cloud service offering within the CMMC scope environment. And I wanted to ask that question. What does it mean to approve the use of it, right? I'm using it. I bought it. Obviously, I approve it. Joy, what does that mean?
I honestly can't wrap my head around that one. Okay. I know how much of a burden it is for any cloud service provider to go through FedRAMP. not just with the money, which is very expensive, but the time,
Right.
right? And I guess that approving the use would mean, do they send a letter to the DoD CIO and say, we're leveraging this? Do they arrange for DIBCAC to take a peek at it and say, is this acceptable? Do they have the C3PAO review it with them for what they've gathered and say, we believe with everything we've been presented that this is valid evidence and we are accepting any risk of moving forward with a FedRAMp equivalent solution for our cloud? Do you have any information on that, Kyle?
I do not. So I don't want to.
It's ambiguous. It feels
No, yeah. So that's the question that was for me. Like for me, yeah, it makes sense to validate the body of evidence of the CSP. You want to make sure they just don't have a letter from somebody they paid. There's
right.
a lot that's on the line here. There's a lot of penalties that have resulted for me because I'm the data custodian, the things of that nature. The only thing that was really, really confusing about this, and not even the point in time determination that was in the big red block, because we know what that means at the point in time of the determination, is that valid? Not when you submitted your body of evidence, but at that point in time, is it still valid? But the approved the use of the CSO when it's in the CMMC scope environment, maybe we can reach out to the audience, have the audience chip in. I'll show point of vulnerability here. I think I know what it means. But if anybody does know what it means, just throw it in the comments. Let us know. We'll talk back and forth and we'll go from there. All right.
It's a big lift.
Now,
I'll tell you, a cloud service provider that's looking to get FedRAMp moderate equivalent so that they can participate in this ecosystem, the more thorough they are in having the packaged evidence, the talking points, this is what your responsibility is, make that as seamless as possible for the consumers, the more successful they'll be. Like I'm really looking at that and saying, if I was one of those firms, and we know one, we have a good partner in one that went through all of this trouble and the expense of it, you have to make it consumable now. So there's a level of education that they're going to have to do with their consumers that are going to be bringing this to their C3PAO and saying, this is how we're moving forward. Another big lift still awaits all these vendors.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, before, and Kyle, I think that I've said this multiple times, the CAICO Corner is my absolute favorite segment, no matter what is released in the entire AV Town Hall. And we could not name our segment CAICO Corner for trademarking purposes. We reached out to the necessary parties. We didn't want any cease and desist letters. So we're going to talk CAICO with Kyle in a second. But I wanted to particularly have you on for this checklist. And we talked about this in the green room because the next segment that I want to talk about before we get into the CAICO topics, right, was the CMMC Ecosystem checklist. So I thought that this was like going to be something when I was reading the agenda, more so that was going to be like, hey, make sure y'all are doing this, make sure y'all are doing that. But instead, it was like looking in the mirror as the AB and the AB saying, we're doing this. This is what we have going on. This is what we need to do. This is when you can expect it to be done. For me, from my perspective, very refreshing. I'm gonna hit you with the Keith Lee. Very refreshing. Very, like it was just one of those things that I felt as though had not been present in AB town halls. Not saying that you guys didn't do it, didn't look in the mirror, but it was one of those things that like there's so many questions. Where's the ISO? Where's this? Where's that? At this point in time, these are all the updates that are important to us for the program to launch. Here they are in a list and order. This is what you can expect from it. Mm-hmm. I like that because at one point in time, under one umbrella slide, one umbrella segment in the AB town hall, we kind of dispelled some of the things. What's going on with this? What's going on with that? Now let's move forward. With that being said, I got some questions.
Okie doke.
All right.
Let's go.
So the things that are on the CMMC ecosystem checklist for CMMC launch are, and I'm going to read them all off, and then I'm going to throw in my notes, and then we can talk a little bit. But the CMMC assessment process, the CAP version 2.0, an update coming for that. The Code of Professional Conduct, which is basically your code of conduct, your contract as a professional or as an organization with the Cyber AB saying that to perform in the ecosystem, you are going to conduct yourself a certain way, and this is a contractual agreement. The reauthorization of C3PAOs, because there's 57 of them right now. We don't want to lose any. We only want to gain them, right? So we want to make sure that none of them fall out of that reauthorization. Not recertification, right? Or not reaccreditation, because that scheme has to be done. That's something else that's done on the checklist prior to the launch of the program. The EMAS access and protocols, which is very important because all the results are going where? EMAS. So if we're going to launch a program and people are going to be doing assessments, Those results have to go somewhere. That is a huge question that people have been asking. What is going on with EMAS? Now we know it's going to happen, and all of these are planned. All these activities we're talking about essentially are planned to go live by the EID date that's listed on the final rule. Am I correct?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
there's a lot of things that we have to do, but you've also got to realize there's a whole throughput of everything, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
And policies and procedures and all those things. And I mean, I think the one thing that, is top priority, especially for Matt at this very moment, is the cap. Now again, recognize that we are also in a position where we don't have the final rule yet, right? We have been working from the proposed rule. So until the rule is final, you won't see an edited version until, post the final rule, because that's when we have to go back in and we have to look at it for not only the CAP perspective, but also the COPC. Because if anything changed on the ethics side or policy sides or anything like that, we have to kind of bake those in as well. Absolutely. So, right now we can action against what we know, which is what is in the proposed rule, but we're not in the 10, as Matt likes to say, when it comes to what's going, behind the scenes on the sausage making side. So whatever the DoD is doing behind the scenes to get everything final and published out to the Federal Register, we're not a part of that. So we will have kind of a little bit of a, catch up component to that on some of this documentation and activity. But EMAS, to your point, definitely, that is something that would need to be put in place, because once people start, when your lead CCA, wants to go in and start uploading that, all the data points have to be there. Now, I will say we've been working on that for years, but then we had the transition between 1.0 to 2.0. And so we had to step back and kind of wait till we have kind of the final thoughts around that, because there's obviously data fields and things that have to be accounted for. The good news is a lot of that work was still intact. So there's, good news there. But, I think those are the three you were kind of just touching upon.
Yeah. So thank you for that update. There were two particular things on this checklist that myself and Joy both teach CCP classes. And a part of the curricula of the CCP class, obviously a huge part of the curricula of the CCP class, is the CMMC assessment process, right? A large chunk of it. And I will say I took the test, and without violating my own COPC, right? There's a lot of questions about the CAP on the test. And so we'll say that humbly and lowly. But that's changing. And that's kind of tricky, because not only is everybody that's going to be conducting the assessments, or the assessors that are the people that are going to be preparing the people for the assessments, been trained on the CAP 1.0, right? It's beat in their head. They're tested on it. They have to do it. But they're going to have to execute assessments based on CAP 2.0, right? Because there is a thing in one of the other documents that's going to get updated by the time the EID of the rule date goes effective, which is the COPC, the Code of Professional Conduct. And one of the pillars of that Code of Professional Conduct is called proper use of methods, right? And proper use of methods, one of the sub-tiers of that pillar, says that as a CMMC professional or as a member of the ecosystem, that you will seek out the most recent versions of CMMC documentation available, right? Authoritative guidance. And you will perform whatever role you're performing in the ecosystem in accordance with that. So my question for you is not saying, hey, this is going to be a problem. What is your recommendation to people as they perform their ecosystem roles with new documents that guide exactly how they do their jobs coming out at the time that they're going to be ramped up the most, right? Because all of these people that we talk about, and all these people that are affected, I have a feeling they're going to be pretty busy when the rule goes final.
Yep. Well, there's a couple things there, and one I can talk about and one I can't.
Anything you can talk about, I'm grateful for. Anything you can't, that's it. And I'm not questioning you. I'm not coming at you. I'm not attacking you. This is a genuine question that I had, because realistically, like if somebody would get nitpicky, they'd be like, hey, you're violating the COPC. And then now you got Wayne Bolin answering 250 emails saying, wait a minute, guys, you're overreacting. So let's see what it is.
Well, first of all, I would say within the CAP, I don't, know if that text is still going to be there or not. I haven't seen what's happening. Matt has been working with working groups based on the proposed rule in drafting out kind of a new CAP. So I don't
Absolutely.
know if that's been removed, because obviously you also have to realize, we're also talking about Rev 2 NIST, not Rev 3, right? And so, somebody could read that line and interpret, well, NIST 3 is the newest one, I should be doing that, right? Even though it's explicitly called out Rev 2.
Absolutely.
So there are things like that I can't say, because I can't see in the cap what is
Mhm.
there yet. But I think that would be clarified in terms of the direction of what documentation you should use. I would say from a training perspective, I mean, obviously, that has been on my mind for some time as we start to move forward with this, because there's a lot of impact to not only the assessors themselves that are working for the C3POs, but also the training channel partners, right? So our APPs and our ATPs will also have to update content. They will have to update the training classes and courses. We'll have to get exams updated. There's like a lot of moving pieces and parts, right? And
Absolutely.
again, we haven't seen it yet, so I can't do all those things. So there are plans in terms of how we want to expedite things, depending on, when everything kind of comes to fruition, to kind of align things as quickly as possible. Hopefully I'll have more information to share next month on this. I don't know yet. We're still working through kind of the details, because, until I know when things are going to, the final rule is going to hit, I don't actually know what that next timeline looks like, right? Until we see that effective date for the 32 CFR. So the bottom line is there are discussions and awareness of trying to get everything aligned as quickly as possible, because we want everybody to be working from the most current and trained in the most current. It's just there's a lot of moving pieces and parts to make that happen.
And would you say, and it's fine if you can't say this or not, but would you say that given the situation and where we kind of sit on the timeline, that you, from your position and the roles that you have to execute, the things that you're responsible for within the conundrum, I don't want you to speak for anybody else in the ABA or in the CAICO, but the things that you have to execute within the whole scenario, you're kind of in a staging pattern, because there's things that are dictated specifically within the rule that you cannot act on until they are final, correct?
Yeah, but I will say that the nice thing is, with the proposed rule, we at least kind of have a baseline, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't expect it to change like 80%, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, everything has
I don't
changed.
either. Yeah.
And again, we kind of saw what kind of comments were going in, and all those type of things, so I mean, I think on the AB side, there's probably going to be more than on the training side, but obviously there's implications of that to the training side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're staging, I think, is more to the point, because if we can get 80% of the way there with what we know right now, then we're really just kind of closing the gap of that last
Absolutely.
20%. So we're not just purely in a planning phase. We're kind of figuring out what we can do now with what we know now, and then what do we do with that like last bit when the rule comes out to make those final modifications. So again, I kind of treat it like agile, right? Like, when we know things, we change things.
Yeah, like making the progressive incremental changes when you're allowed to make the incremental changes, and when it's not going to be also a case of wasted effort, right? Because there's some things that may change. Why go through all that work if it's something that that is on the bill to change?
Right.
Speaking of things that are changing, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, and I just would say too, and to that point, and Joy remembers this a long time ago when she would ask me questions, and I'm like, I am not going to say anything until I know anything, because the one thing I don't want to do, and this is on my side, and I know that this is also on Matt's side, which is why you haven't seen a new COPC, for example, is that we don't want to make people spend time and money going through things if they are subject to change. So
Sure.
I don't want to tell a training partner that this may or may not happen if I don't know for sure, right? Because you have to all plan in the ecosystem. You have to plan accordingly. You have to budget accordingly. You have to do all these things. You have to, figure out your resources. And to do that means that you need to action on things that are fact, not speculation. And that's really our role, is to always kind of be that filter between what may be being said in the ecosystem and then what we can communicate as fact.
Okay. I appreciate that insight. And there's some more insight that I'm going to ask you for now. I'm going to turn it over to Joy in a second and ask for this insight. And the reason why is because I think it's very vital. There are a lot of things that are changing with regards to roles, with badging, with trainings, and things like that.
Mhm.
A lot of changes to what people have become accustomed to. You went over them in depth last night in the CAICO corner, and then I was hoping that you would just, the reason we wanted you on the show is so that you enjoy, because Joy has such an extensive background in developing a training program and working from again like the ground level of training and development for LTPs, now ATPs, that I kind of wanted the audience to get exposed to that back and forth conversation with you with regards to the training, maybe some of her concerns, some of the questions that you can answer. So if we can get into that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I thought maybe we'd start at a high level fun thing. Kyle and I do go back a few years. I think that we gave each other a lot of gray hair at the outset of our relationship. It's fun to be able to laugh about now, but boy, the early days of being a licensed training provider, which was the original, now it's a accredited training provider. Is that what it is?
Approved.
Approved training provider. But in the early day, over at Edwards Performance Solutions, and they are one of many training providers in the marketplace. Just to be clear, I'm not trying to play favorites or anything by mentioning that name, but that is who I was with, and my whole role and my metrics for success were based on how many students am I going to bring into these classes? What are we going to charge? Which instructors am I going to bring on? And all of this is done at multiple false starts, right? And it was very hard to just be flexible and just kind of wait because, and what we've seen is that I think there were a lot of training providers that were really excited at the outset of it. And then we had such huge delays and impacts to what was happening with that training program that some of them had to kind of bow out and say, you know what, maybe we'll come back when we get closer to the final rule. And then the other fun thing that Kyle and I experienced together was the rule drop from 1.0 to 2.0. And when that happened, we happened to be right in the middle of a 5-day boot camp. I think it was on a Tuesday, and we had taught all day Monday. And Brian Hubbard and I were on with our students on Tuesday, and we're like, well, good morning, everybody. And in that, navigating the conversation around our slide decks for the next 4 days literally have information that we all know is not as valid as it was before. I mean, it's such an uncomfortable conversation, right? And Kyle, like when she says that she was trying to provide information to the training providers like myself, like I was stalking poor Kyle. I was like, how are we supposed to do this?
Yep.
So do you guys think that that's part of the challenges that you face when you're developing something from the ground up, right? Is that there's this public need for, the most recent knowledge, the most recent information, because it's something that they have to attack and it means a lot to them. And you're generating it with severe limitations on what you can distribute or what you can know or what you're exposed to. And you have to create something, essentially a program, in this case, to protect CUI that is ready to go live day one, but you can't really commit to every single thing in the program until the rule goes final. Unfortunately, the same day that the program goes live is very close proximity to the day that the rule will go final, right? That EID date is going to be stretched out maybe within 60 days. So
yeah, but we still have a scenario, and I'm excited to see how this unfolds because, like Kyle said, hopefully we're not going to have an 80% change of content. There was a big change of content when we went from, we were using slides that still had 5 levels on them, and we actually were not allowed to change our slides until we had the new blueprint for what the updated CCP class would include in it. That blueprint, I think, took 4 to 6 months to get into the hands of the publishers to start to modify their curricula, right, Kyle? It
wasn't quite 4 to 6. It was about 4 months, I would say, because what really happened is November 9th. I remember the day well. It's March, it's burned into my brain. You got to realize we actually had CCP and CCA exams ready to launch for beta in December. So, I mean, we were that close to the finish line, right? LTPs were up and running on the content. The exams were about to launch, in the beta phase. So we were like right on the cusp of 1.0 going, right?
Mhm.
When 2.0 dropped.
Yeah.
And, at that point, there was a discussion of, do we stop all the training right now, period, point blank? Or do we keep moving ahead, right? And the bottom line is we all agreed we have to keep moving ahead because we have to build this pipeline of assessors, right?
Yeah.
We have to start getting things moving. And to do that meant that we had to kind of step back, rework the blueprint, rework what we have, a plan for what we had to do for the exams, how we were going to communicate that back out to the training channel to get you guys up and running. If you remember, we built a Delta training to close that gap and give everybody that, to get them up to speed so that we could keep the training providers on track. There was a lot of stepping back and then figuring out how to move forward when that happened. And first and foremost, I will say, what we didn't want to do is put any of our partners in a position where they lost out on their investment, right? You put all this time and energy and cost into this, we didn't want to just say, okay, well, let's just sit here and wait and see what happens, right? We wanted to make sure that everybody kept moving forward and that, people were getting trained and certified. So, it was a rough time, but, I think we've all navigated it together. And truthfully, the ATPs and the APPs that have stuck with the program that actually had the wherewithal to do so, because not all had the funding to do so, we very much appreciate. But yeah, it's been an interesting time. And to your point, Jason, we've been building this program while we're flying the plane. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And in certification world, that's not how you do it.
No.
In certification world, you have a standard and you build to it.
Yeah.
And it continues to be in flux. I mean, this is one of the things that as instructors, we've become a lot more adept at is teaching definitely to our slides and the workbooks and curriculum that was all approved. Officially, it has the CAICO approved training materials stamp on it. But in addition to that, we will pull up the actual website of the Cyber AB and show how things might have changed compared to what they see on the slides, just so that we're able to keep the students current enough with official changes in the program, either from the DoD or from the Cyber AB, but also just constantly reiterating the exam is based on the material that we're showing you on the slides and in the workbooks. And because our number one goal is to get them through the exam, right? The number two goal is for them to understand exactly where they go to for the source of the most updated information and what that might look like now, right? So we have to give them historical knowledge, and then we have to give them current knowledge in a way that doesn't confuse them for that exam. And I think that a lot of the instructors are very good at that now. I mean, it's been an ongoing moving target, if you will, but in my mind, constantly improving. And, we had a couple of slides from last night's town hall that we were going to share out, but I think in the interest of time and just being able to talk conversationally, Kyle, about a couple of the changes that I think are fantastic around the requirements for a CCP and CCA. Let's talk background check first. The suitability now being the background, tier 3 background investigation. Eligibility determination. That's a mouthful.
It is. I just say tier 3.
Yeah. And that's for a CCP now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you think about it, I mean, the intent of that was that, and again, this is not from me, this is from the DoD, but I think the intent of that is more about the fact that, if you want to start utilizing CCPs in the field, right? Working out there is a risk that they could be exposed to CUI at some point, right? And the whole point of having tier 3 at the level 2 is that protection of the CUI. So if you have individuals working in a CCA capacity and say, for example, they bring in somebody who's a CCP that doesn't have tier 3 and they stumble into CUI, one has been validated and one hasn't, right? And so it makes perfect sense. Now, I think we would all agree that the process for actually getting a tier 3 is not optimal in terms of speed. But, the truth of the matter is it's important to make sure that they have that.
Yeah, and
So I hold on. Can I jump in for 1 second?
yeah.
I have a couple questions that steer directly from that, and they are questions that were in the Q&A last night. There's layers to the tier 3, right? There's the tier 3. You go through it, you submit it, you go fingerprints, all that stuff submitted and reviewed by a person. Then you receive an email. That email says you have been given the okay to proceed, or a hard stop, right? I'm giving you the release. My question and some of the questions in the Q&A result from is my suitability determination determined at the point when I get the okay and release to work, or when all of that's done and the logistical process is done on the back end, which takes a long period of time? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Because it was because I got an email that said you're good, but not good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're good, right. You can be able to work, nudge, nudge. But this is a long process.
My email said you're good and fantastic. So I don't know who sent your email.
Listen, my personality isn't as bubbly as yours. And after going through multiple fingerprints and going through the fingerprint location, I'm pretty sure that I was a peach. Okay. But we got through it.
And the other thing is, yes, that when the Cyber AB or CAICO receives all the final documentation and it's updated on the website is when you're really good to go, because any C3PAO or OSA that might be looking to hire a CCP is going to want to see it validated on the Cyber AB marketplace.
Correct.
I would think.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And we are looking to ways to expedite that process. We will continue to work with the PMO to do that. We can make suggestions and we can make recommendations. Obviously, they have their own teams and things that they have to work with, and then it goes through to WHS, and so there's a lot of handoffs in this. We just kind of intake the documents and then we review and make sure they're good to go, take the resume and then send them over, and then it's out of our hands. And until we receive a notification back, we don't even know that it's happened. So just because you have a letter, doesn't necessarily mean that you're ready to go. And especially with the new requirements, because just because you have your tier 3 and say you passed your exam and you're, which obviously means you've completed your training, doesn't mean you've now met all the other requirements. So that is why, to your point, Joy, the marketplace is the fact of, the source of truth on who has met everything that they need to meet to actually participate.
All right. So the tier 3 suitability is one of those things that it has a lot of questions for it. And there's a lot of other changes that are going in. And Joy, I know that you have, in our conversations leading up to the show, you have so many questions for this and so many bits of information that you feel are necessary to dish out. Do you want to go in depth on some more of those?
Well, just building on the background check now required for the CCP, I just want to throw out, that's my most favorite certification, because when we're teaching these courses, I am surprised every time. Maybe 25% of the student body in the CCP class are individuals who want to go on to the CCA and be assessors. 75% of those are consultants, managed service providers, and internal IT. Right? So it's really great to see the adoption. Does it surprise you, Kyle, the adoption outside of the assessor world of that CCP certification?
Absolutely not. And I would expect that it's going to keep increasing, and we'll probably start seeing it, moving into more academic channels as well. Because first of all, the opportunity is broad, right? You can become an assessor, you can become, you can work in kind of that, working for your own organization and bringing it back to your organization. You can work in compliance. I mean, it's a broad brush in terms of just having that knowledge as part of your, of your ethos to move forward with, whatever you're doing in cyber. So I'm not surprised. I would like to see that increase to 75% becoming assessors and 25% of information.
I think a lot of people would.
But that's going to take some time. And again, as the program is getting ramped up, I think that will happen. And we will see that transition over time as the adoption starts to broaden. But I'm not surprised currently that is the case.
All right. Now let's talk CCA it feels like there's a lot more changes with the CCA, and we're talking about both background requirements, cybersecurity experience, assessment experience. Talk us through the hit list that you shared last night.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're looking at there is, again, and this is why the 3 assessments is no longer required, is because we see so much more experience coming out from demonstrating as a CCA. You have 3 years of cybersecurity experience, i.e. technical, right? Not working for a cybersecurity company in the accounting department. So that demonstrates your cybersecurity experience, right? That's kind of point 1. The 1 year of assessment and or audit experience, and that's new because, audit has always been kind of thrown out there, and these are assessors, not auditors. However, the experience that you gain as an auditor is about, following a compliance standard and following a process and a checklist and reviewing evidence and working with a team. So it still instills a lot of the same kind of skills that you would expect for a CMC assessor. So that's one year of auditor assessment experience. And then we get to the actual 8140, right? And the 8140 is where we're saying that you hold 1 active certification. And when we look at 8140.3, which is replaced 8570, so 8570 no longer exists, but it did when the proposed rule came out. So I'm only focused on 8140 because 8570 has since sunsetted.
Yeah.
That we're talking about intermediate or advanced level for a CCA, because it specifies intermediate, but it really means intermediate or advanced. Because if you're holding a CISSP, you don't need to go back and get a pen test plus, right? You're good to go. So those are kind of the newer requirements that you're seeing. You're seeing the cybersecurity experience, the audit experience, the certification. Those are the key components there.
And it helps so much because the 3 assessment requirement was a tough one. That means that you're kind of like just fighting to get your way onto an assessment team. And we want to make sure that we just can out of the gate not cause a bottleneck like that. You've got the experience, get out there and start doing your thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's part of, when you're setting up a new program, if you don't have the ecosystem that exists to go get the mock experience from, that's the chicken and the egg, right? Exactly. And that was what was problematic about that. And I think what the DoD did in introducing these experiential requirements, as well as the certification, that kind of takes care of that, so that we know that the people that are getting out there have cybersecurity experience, they have former experience in auditing and assessing, and they hold these certifications, which again demonstrates those skills, just as CCP and CCA validates the skills for individuals pursuing CMMC.
Exactly. Well, I'm really excited to see these changes coming down. I'm very interested in the new documentation that may be coming out. Very interested to see what an updated blueprint for the updates to the CCP or CCA may be, if we end up doing that on the training side. If not, I'm sure that the Delta training would serve just fine like last time. But it's a lot more fun now, not being at a training provider, but still being able to do the teaching, meeting everyone in the ecosystem. For anybody out there that has done cybersecurity training before, that's interested in CMMC, it's one of the most fulfilling things that I do. It's not even my job at Summit 7, but I'm really grateful that I have an opportunity to still get out there and be an assessor and be an instructor. It really keeps my finger on the pulse and the ecosystem. And it's so fulfilling to be on LinkedIn with hundreds of people that are like, we loved your class, or meeting them in person. When Kyle and I first met in person, we were like, oh, you're Kyle, you're Joy. It's just so great to have us all coming together now, and very excited for the road ahead. Kyle, I know that your time is super busy right now. I want to thank you so much for joining Jason and I, our first guest on the new format.
Yeah, I'm honored.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Kyle, again, thanks a lot. Joy, I am super, super excited once a month to get to dish with you, the great JBB, and have our audience come in and get to hear some of the insights that you have. And let's see what kind of guests that we can spin up and what kind of shows. Kyle, I'm pretty sure as things kick up, we are going to be seeing a lot more of you once a month, hopefully, and hopefully the time permits. I appreciate your time for coming. We'll see you next week, folks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.